Okay, guys. So in this lecture, we are going to talk about the different about anemias and different and its different types. Anemia is basically a blood disorder in which the hemoglobin concentration in the blood decreases, either due to a decrease in the number of red blood cells or due to that decrease in hemoglobin in each cell. Okay, so in either of the two cases, anemia would develop. It has the four major types of anemia that we are going to discuss in this lecture include blood loss anemia, high aplastic anemia, megaloblastic anemia, hemolytic anemia. This includes the sickle cell anemia. Is a type of hemolytic anemia. We are going to look at them one by one in great detail. All right, so now let's start out from blood loss anemia. Okay, blood loss anemia, as the name suggests, anemia which is results from due to blood loss. Usually occurs immediately after hemorrhage. Hemorrhage is basically the loss of blood through ruptured blood vessels that occurs due to some physical trauma. Okay, so if blood vessels are ruptured, then the blood is more likely to leak out of the blood vessels, and so this might lead to blood loss from the internal environment of the body from the environment of the body. And so if the blood loss occurs uh, anemia can result. And so the hemoglobin concentration can decrease. So now in order to recover, what the body does is that it tries recovering the fluid portion first in only 1 to 3 days. Okay, this is quite a rapid response. In 1 to 3 days the fluid portion of the blood is recovered, but given that a second hemorrhage does not occur. Okay, if a second hemorrhage occurs, then it can take more days. But if we assume that only the first hemorrhage has occurred and the body is trying to recover itself, it will take 1 to 3 days for the fluid portion to recover. Then, but the red blood cell concentration would be greatly reduced because the red blood cells do not recover as quickly as the fluid portion. Okay, the red blood cell, it takes more time for the red blood cells to recover, approximately 3 to 6 weeks for the red blood cells count to normalize. And the new red blood cells which are formed, they are much smaller in size. And they would have a lower hemoglobin content. They would have a lower hemoglobin content as compared to the normal red blood cells. And therefore, due to this characteristic, small size and low hemoglobin content, they appear to be, due to low hemoglobin content, they appear to be pale. I've given a diagram over here. These are pale cells and much smaller in size than the normal red blood cells. And such type of anemia due to small size of cells is called microcytic, and due to low hemoglobin content in the cells, hypochromic anemia. Microcytic hypochromic anemia, because microcytic means a small cell size, hypochromic means low concentration of the pigment. The pigment which is present inside the red blood cells, as I told you, is hemoglobin. We've made several lectures on hemoglobin as well. So I've given the link to one of those lectures in the description, so do check that out on hemoglobin. It's very important as well. Anyways, now, the microcytic hypochromic anemia occurs due to blood loss anemia because the new cells which are made, they have a much smaller size and they are paler in color as compared to the normal red blood cells. Okay, now we've talked about this, and it takes 3 to 6 weeks for the red blood cell count to normalize. Okay, so this is your first type of anemia, the blood loss anemia that usually occurs due to some physical trauma. So for example, the hemorrhage. Okay, now let's talk about the second type of anemia called the aplastic anemia. Okay, aplastic anemia usually occurs due to the bone marrow dysfunction, and in this case, if there is some damage to the bone marrow, can be in the form of X-ray therapy. If there is an over exposure to X-rays, since they are ionizing radiation, they can damage the bone marrow. And then if there is certain chemotherapies, certain autoimmune diseases, all these can be factors that could lead to bone marrow dysfunction. As a result, what happens that since the red blood cells, they arise from bone marrow cells, since bone marrow cells are the precursors of red blood cells, since the red blood cells are made from bone marrow cells, what happens if the bone marrow aplasia occurs? The red blood cell concentration also decreases. Aplasia means decrease in the number of the cells. So a bone marrow aplasia means the decrease in the number of the bone marrow cells. All right, so now an autoimmune disorder that I have listed as an example is lupus erythematosus, in which the bone marrow is attacked by the body's own immune system, and so the bone marrow cells, they are destroyed. And other chemicals like benzene and insecticides can also damage the bone marrow, leading to its dysfunction. Okay, about half of the aplastic anemia cases are unknown. Their causes are unknown. Okay, about half of the aplastic anemia causes are unknown. In half of them, the cause is unknown, and such anemia in which the cause is unknown is called idiopathic aplastic anemia. Okay, the causes are unknown. Okay, most of about half of the aplastic anemia cases, the causes are unknown. So can be due to several, can be due to any of these causes. Okay, and so such type of anemia are called idiopathic. Idiopathic means the cause being unknown. Okay, idiopathic aplastic anemia. So okay, this is your second type of anemia that may occur due to bone marrow dysfunction and is very high yield, guys. So I would really suggest that please do learn this very carefully and learn this very nicely. Okay, the third type of anemia, this overlaps with our lecture on vitamin B12 and folic acid that we did in the last few lectures. We talked about the folic acid, the role of vitamin B12 and folic acid, and the intrinsic factor. Uh, while we were discussing the factors that are responsible for the maturation, that are needed for the maturation of red blood cells, I've given a link to this lecture as well in the description below, so do check that out as well. Okay, in megaloblastic anemia, what happens is that megaloblasts are basically the cells which are larger, which have a size which is larger than normal. Okay, and they have a very irregular size and occurs due to lack of vitamin B12 or folic acid or the intrinsic factor. Okay, now I've discussed each of them in the previous lecture. Do check that out first before proceeding further. Okay, now what happens is that in this case, occurs in the case of lack of vitamin B12, folic acid, or intrinsic factor released by the intrinsic factor is released by the gastric mucosa. Okay, this is released by the gastric mucosa, and vitamin B12 and folic acid have to be taken in diet. They are not made in the body. Vitamin B12 and folic acid are essentially important in the maturation of red blood cells. Previous lecture has been. The link has been given in the description. Okay, due to lack of these components, vitamin B12 and folic acid, what would happen? Okay, if the gastric mucosa becomes atrophic and intrinsic factor is not being released and B12 is not absorbed, or if a sprue occurs, sprue is again a condition in which this sprue over here, this sprue is a condition in which again the efficiency of vitamin B12 and folic acid absorption decreases. What happens is that megaloblastic anemia occurs. Okay, due to lack of vitamin B12 and folic acid, RBCs do not mature and divide properly, because since we know that these are the two components needed for the formation of the DNA component called thymidine triphosphate, if they are not made, they are not absorbed properly, then what happens is that the RBCs are not able to mature and divide properly. As a result, they form odd shaped, larger than normal size red blood cells called megaloblasts, and these megaloblasts, they are quite fragile and they have a much shorter lifespan than the normal red blood cells. Although they can transport oxygen normally, but they are much fragile and they have a much shorter lifespan than the normal red blood cells. Therefore, atrophy of the gastric mucosa, as in case of pernicious anemia. Okay, pernicious anemia has also been discussed in that lecture, so do check that out, the one whose link is given in the description. Or intestinal sprue. Intestinal sprue is a condition in which the villi of the intestine become flattened rather than finger-like projection. They become flattened and the intestine becomes inflamed, due to which malabsorption occurs. Okay, malabsorption of the substances in the diet occurs. So these conditions, these two conditions, okay, the pernicious anemia, atrophic gastric mucosa, and sprue, they may result in megaloblastic anemia due to lack of vitamin B12 and folic acid absorption. Okay, megaloblasts are basically they are the earlier stages of red blood cells over here. As you can see that some of them are immature and some of them have reached maturity. And these are your normal red blood cells. Okay, so these are how megaloblasts compared to the normal red blood cells have a much larger shape than the normal red blood cells. Okay, so this was it for the megaloblastic anemia. Now, after megaloblastic anemia, so this was our third type. Now, the fourth type of anemia and the last type of anemia that we are going to discuss is called hemolytic anemia. Okay, What is hemolysis? Hemolysis is basically the breakdown or the rupturing of the red blood cells. Okay, in this anemia, it has a few types that we are going to discuss in detail. Okay. Okay, so in hemolytic anemia, the cause is usually hereditary. Okay, hereditary causes due to some certain inherited cause, hemolytic anemia occurs. Okay, the cells in hemolytic anemia, they are fragile, they are delicate membrane, and they are easily ruptured. Okay, hemolysis means rupturing or breakdown of red blood cells. As I told you guys earlier, as they pass through the blood capillaries and spleen, there are chances that they might get destroyed, they might get bursted, they might get ruptured. And if the cell membrane gets ruptured, then the cell will die. The cell is no more useful for oxygen transport, because the hemoglobin will then be released from the cell, and then it will not be capable of transporting the oxygen. The number of red blood cells may be normal or maybe greater than normal. Okay, maybe greater than normal red blood cells are present, but they are destroyed at a faster rate than they are formed. Okay, the rate of production is much slower than the rate of destruction. They are destroyed at a much faster rate because they are easily ruptured, they have delicate membrane. So even though if the body is producing these red blood cells in a very high concentration at a very high rate due to erythropoietin secretion. Erythropoietin, we've discussed erythropoietin as well in the previous lectures. I'll give the link to this lecture as well in the description, so do check that out as well. So erythropoietin, basically the glycoprotein produced by the kidney in case of hypoxia, it might stimulate the stem cells to produce more and more red blood cells, but the rate of as a result, what happens is that the rate of the red blood cells which are formed and present in the blood might go much higher than normal, but they are destroyed at a much faster rate than that. Okay, due to their short lifespan, and hence serious anemia results. Okay, even though they are produced at a faster rate, but they are destroyed at an even faster rate. So due to this, some serious anemia occurs, and we've got a few examples of hemolytic anemia as well. Okay, the first one is hereditary spherocytosis, the second one is sickle cell anemia, and the third one is erythroblastosis fatalis. These are very important diseases. Okay guys, high yield topics, so please do them very carefully. Okay, let's talk about the first one, hereditary spherocytosis. Okay, in this case, what happens is that the RBCs which are formed, they are much smaller and spherical in size rather than the normal biconcave disc shape. Okay, and so if as a result, and since they have a delicate cell membrane, they usually burst when they pass through the splenic pulp. Okay, the spleen, as you know, is contain tight junction, which is where the burnout or the delicate red blood cells are destroyed. These small spherocytes also, when they pass through the splenic pulp, they are destroyed and ruptured. Okay, so patients might get splenomegaly. Splenomegaly means enlarged spleen, because many red blood cells are being destroyed over there, so this it becomes enlarged. And jaundice, in addition to anemia, might also appear. Jaundice might appear. Okay, so these are a few. Jaundice accompanies the anemia, in addition to splenomegaly. So in hereditary spherocytosis, and this is how the spherocytes look like. Okay, they are smaller than the normal red blood cells, and they are round in shape. They are spherical in shape. Then the second type, the sickle cell anemia, the one which I'm assuming that you guys are very familiar with already. Let's talk about it. Okay, I've gathered all the important points regarding sickle cell anemia right over here. Okay, sickle cell anemia. This is a hereditary disorder in which occurs due to point mutation on chromosome 11. Point mutation, gene mutation. Point mutation is the same thing as gene mutation on chromosome 11. Okay, due to this mutation, adenine is replaced by thymine, and what happens is that the glutamic acid that should be placed in that on the glutamic acid, which is an acidic polar amino acid, it gets replaced with valine, which is a non-polar amino acid, on the sixth position of beta chain of hemoglobin, and hence the normal HbA is not formed, but rather HbS, a different variant of hemoglobin is formed. Now, this HbS is very dangerous. When it is exposed to low oxygen concentration, low oxygen tension, what happens is that it becomes very dangerous. It forms very long crystals of approximately 15 micrometer length, which is much greater than the average length of the red blood cells themselves, which are approximately 7.2 to 7.8 micrometers. This causes the shape of the red blood cells to change, and they make them sickle shape. Okay, so low oxygen concentration causes the HbS to make long crystals, and these crystals are much longer than the or length of red blood cells themselves, which causes the red blood cells to change their shape, making them sickle shaped. The cell membranes become delicate and are easily ruptured. So again, hemolytic anemia occurs. Okay, the cell membranes get ruptured. A person might enter a vicious cycle as well. Basically, a positive feedback loop might begin if it is exposed he is exposed to low oxygen tension in the blood. Okay, why? Because this low oxygen tension, what it will cause is that it will cause the sickling to increase, right? It will cause the hemoglobin, the HbS, to form long crystals, and once the long crystals are formed, these long crystal containing red blood cells, the sickle shaped red blood cells, are will not be as efficient in transporting oxygen. So as a result, the oxygen tension will decrease even further, and then this even further decrease in oxygen tension would then further cause further sickling, and hence this entire positive feedback loop will start out. Vicious cycle will begin, and which is very dangerous and may eventually lead to death. Okay, so this is a very dangerous condition. So the sickle cell anemia patients must not be exposed to low oxygen tension. Okay, so as a decrease in oxygen concentration would cause sickling, and this sickling would in turn decrease the oxygen tension even further, and hence even more sickling would occur. The positive feedback loop will start. Okay, so this is all the information about sickle cell anemia that I've gathered from different sources. Okay, the diagram is over here of sickle shaped cells. You can see that it is showing a sickling. These cells are showing sickling. Okay, they have abnormal sickle shape. They are abnormal and sickle shaped. Okay. Now, the last type of hemolytic anemia, the erythroblastosis fetalis. Okay, it occurs as a result of difference in the blood group, the Rh factor blood group between the blood of the fetus and the mother. Okay, if the fetus is Rh positive, okay, if it contains the Rh antigens, if the fetus blood contains Rh positive antigens, but the mother is Rh negative, what happens is that if the mother is Rh negative but the fetus is Rh positive, what happens is that the mother's immune system, it starts forming antibodies against this uh, Rh antigen, and as a result, what happens if the fetus is Rh positive, mother is Rh negative, mother's immune system might form antibodies against the Rh antigens on the erythrocytes of the fetus. Rh antigens are present on the erythrocytes of the fetus, and these antibodies, they start binding to the erythrocytes of the fetus, the fetal erythrocytes, and which make them the fetal erythrocytes quite delicate, and hence eventually lead to the hemolysis of fetal erythrocytes. So again, this is a type of hemolytic anemia as well. So in turn of that, what happens? The body of the fetus, it tries to replenish this decreased RBC number by after binding, they become fragile and hence are destroyed. So, in order to rapidly replace the RBCs that have been destroyed, many of the newly formed red blood cells in the blast forms are released into the blood for oxygen transport. Okay, blast forms are basically the starting form, the early phases, the immature form of red blood cells, the mother cells of the red blood cells, the mother cells or the immature forms of the red blood cells. They start entering the red blood. Because the body of the fetus now is in an immediate need for more red blood cells, and since most of the red blood cells have been destroyed by the immune system of the mother due to the Rh antigen, so what happens is that the fetal blood cells, the blast cells of the fetus, they start forming the new red blood cells very rapidly. And during this rapid release, what happens? Many of the blood cells which are not fully matured, many of the red blood cells which are not fully matured, they enter the blood for oxygen transport. Okay, so this is a condition again for erythroblastosis fetalis. Okay, this occurs due to the attack of the immune system from mother. Okay, and we've made a video on this lecture as well, the stages of erythrocyte maturation. I've given the link to that as well in the description. So please do check that out as well to see how these red blood cells are made at different stages. Okay. So thank you so much, guys. In the next lecture, we are going to deal with polycythemia, which is actually the reverse of anemia. Okay.